Hey, Toothers, it's just me. Obviously, I did another recording that I'm not sure. It, I had a point and it became a tirade, so I'm debating even putting that out because I don't know. I don't know if there's value in it. Just hearing a fat man complain. You feel like there's. I don't know. I have to listen to it again and decide if that's worth handing out. But I wanted to talk about something a little different today. I know lately I've been, the couple episodes prior were about things I'm learning about the brain and our minds and how we can process information and how we kind of deal with things consciously, subconsciously, which also becomes a complication in terms of free will, in the sense that do we have it? Are we deterministic? Are we completely determined beings, based on our chemical makeup and the influences that alter the chemical makeup in our little wet meat packages of neurons or whatever. Sorry, he was a pedestrian looking like he was lost on a road with like 4 houses. It was very strange. Continuing on. So I do have other things that are going on in my brain, which I think is part of the problem of being me, is I do a lot of thinking. I surely get more sleep during the night. But I do have other interests, right? So one of the things that I've talked about in the past, or that I've written about in the past, is different concepts around ethics, morals, laws, right? Choices, consequences that are beneficial, detrimental, that sort of general buzzword bingo. And I have a couple other areas I want to kind of like 3D the impacts on our choices, on those consequences, which I haven't done yet. But I started thinking about, we have like these catchphrases, right? We have these things that we think about or that we were told when we were growing up. And I've got kids. I've had them for a while, and there are some things that I tell them a lot, that I try to impress upon them a lot. And in thinking of my own childhood, like I grew up in a fairly religious household, and we talked about the Ten Commandments, right? We didn't talk about the oddities between the couple instances of them showing up in the Hebrew Scriptures, but that's neither here nor there. But we didn't talk about those. We talked about, there are various laws in the Hebrew Scriptures, which I think I tirade partially against in various entries in this catalog of absurdities. And, one of the things that we also learned, so what I started thinking about was interesting to me because, we have commandments, we have rules, we have things we're supposed to follow. And yet we would talk about in the church, we would talk about how Jesus was very much in opposition to the legalistic preachings and teachings and, obsessive nature of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. You have to do certain things in a certain way in order to be whatever. But, Jesus was almost like the hippie in that discussion, because he's like, look, you only have to do a couple things, and everything else is cake, right? The rest of it is just whatever. But these are the things you have to do in order to get to heaven. So, I enjoy that concept in the sense that we focus a lot on what we have to do and how we have to do it. And look, I grew up, I was a perfectionist as a child. If I wasn't coloring inside the lines, I was tearing up the paper and starting over. I think I talked about it. So, I have a tendency to still do that. Not necessarily with coloring. I'm a little more forgiving of myself in that respect. Not a lot, but a little bit. But I'll play video games where we're supposed to build something, and if it's not quite right, I'll destroy the whole thing and then start like a brand new game. Maybe it's part of just general anxiety that I have, but I needed it to be different. So I totally understand this urge, right? There is something comforting right? Being able to manage expectations, being able to manage your own understanding of your reality, which is where things like faith and things like religion come in handy for people because it gives them that sense of stability. Whether it's legitimate or not is irrelevant. It's just, it offers something. And I'm not saying that being a non-believer offers you nothing. It just offers you more reason to uh, grasp your hands around reality and to have to grapple with that. And, I think if you have a decent core to work with, you're more likely to, navigate some of the harshness, some of the beauty of existence. But I don't want, see, I'm coming up with these ideas, right? I don't want to be kind of these quick or quip ideas, right? These just quick things you can think to say, off the bat, the things that can rattle around in your head, right? One of the only chunks of the Bible that I'm willing to quote pretty excessively is going to be, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I haven't taken the time to figure out if that's exactly the meaning of the text in its original language. I'm going to take that particular statement just as is because it seems to apply. I think we've been able to see that throughout history that is definitely an adage that we could agree on. I mean, in terms of all evil, not exclusively. I'm going to say that the love of money has a monopoly on all evil, but it's got a lot, and maybe it is a monopoly. I mean, realistically, but these are the things that I'm thinking about. But I don't want them to be prescriptions, right? I was reading Bertrand Russell's Decalogue, which is a kind of direct, maybe not direct, but it is meant to mimic the idea of the Ten Commandments, right? That's what a Decalogue is. It's 10 Commandments. And there's some repetition to them, but they are largely just be humble, be skeptical, and, I don't know, don't be a jerk, right? And I think it's the Satanic Temple. Yeah, the Satanic Temple. They've got a handful of their own commandments. I think it's like 7, I forget, that are directly meant to be better than or more human than what we get out of the 10 Commandments. Right? I mean, so we have a number of people that are coming up with these ideas. And look, I don't think specifically that the Satanic Temple or Bertrand Russell meant them as, must-dos, right? They're not necessarily commandments. It's more just, hey, here's some things to think about. And one of the things that I've learned a lot through, decades of employment is this concept of guardrails. They weren't definitive yes or no's. They were like, listen, try to avoid this, right? Get to just the edge of the cliff without going over. I mean, try not to get too close to the cliff, but there's a cliff, right? There becomes a point where it's too far, but you have wiggle room. So I started coming up with these quips that I mentioned, and I think I want to call them guardrails because I don't feel like commandments. I feel like commandments it's too intense in general, but I also like the idea of them being, like the bumper rails in a bowling alley. Right, you can try and go straight as you want to, but sometimes the ball slips. Sometimes it slides in the wrong direction, and you still want to hit a pin. I mean, you may not always hit your pin, but you want to at least get it as in line with the pins as possible, right? I guess driving, right? I mean, ideally, you want to stay between the lines, right? You want the yellow lines on the left side, the white line on the right side. Sometimes you have to change that up, but ideally, you want to do that. Right? Because you want to avoid certain potential calamities. There are times where potential calamities may not be directly in front of you, and you can make some adjustments. But all in all, it's better just to follow those kind of accepted rules. And And yeah, it's some of these laws are they're rigid in their enforcement and their purposes, but not all of them have that same sort of. Uh, I mean, you're going to get in trouble, right? If a cop catches you, there's no decent reason for you to be doing that. You're going to get in trouble, and you should, because you're violating what we all have consented to when we got our driver's license. We took the training we had to take, right? It's a little more all over the place than I planned on it, but again, I probably could use more sleep. But ultimately, I do want to try to flesh some of these out, kind of more specifically. And actually, you know what? Let me start with one that I wasn't going to start with, but consent. And I feel like consent in all things is a good one to think about. And I know that we talk a lot about consent currently in terms of relationships, consensual romantic relationships, right? Which I am a big fan of. I'm a big fan of there being consent in relationships, right? I mean, the whole argument against anything non-heteronormative is irrelevant. Is mostly irrelevant to me, right? As long as it's consenting adults, I don't care. Right? If it involves children, you should probably be burned at the stake. I'm not a real big fan of the animal thing either, because to me they're not consenting. They're not able to consent. It's just it's just happening to them. I feel like those are victims, right? So if there are victims, it's not consenting, right? And that's more than I plan on saying about it, but obviously that's where people's minds go currently when saying the word consent. But we consent in so many areas of our lives. We consent when we have a conversation with somebody, to ideally have a conversation. We may go into it consenting to the idea of a discussion, and it may get out of hand. It may become something that we did not consent to. We didn't walk into the discussion expecting it to become, a fist fight. We didn't consent to that, like that. That's too far. When we're driving, like I just said, we consent to agreeing to the rules of the road. It manages expectations for everybody. It keeps people safe because we're all on the same page how to operate on a shared space with machinery that could kill us at 20 miles an hour or whatever. I forget if it's 20 or 30 or like 10 or whatever. I guess depending on the car. I had somebody recently tell me a story about his buddy had was it the Toyota Echo, and he got surrounded by a bunch of turkeys, and rather than just drive off, he tried to honk at him, and then they attacked his car, and they totaled his car, punctured all his tires, took out his mirrors, scratched up the windshield. It's crazy stuff. Wild turkeys are nuts. Domestic turkeys are stupid, but wild turkeys are apparently way more violent than I thought. What was I saying? Yeah, so we agreed to various things. When we get a job, we consent to whatever the agreement was for taking the job, right? Doing the work. For me, there have been certifications that have had to happen, doing goals. I mean, we agree to these things, right? So I feel like consent in all things is a good one to have in your brain, because it also can help you establish boundaries. If you're thinking about, consent in all things. Well, I don't want to consent to this, right? I feel like this may be something that I will not benefit from, or will not benefit anybody that is involved in the situation. I don't want to do this, right? And it also, it belies the idea that we don't have the option of choice. But I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. But in terms of conscious or unconscious decisions, right? If we are willing to accept certain situations, to some level, some of that's our responsibility for allowing those things to happen. Now, look, again, if you're a victim of something that you did not consent to, that's not the same thing. And, I'm sorry, if anybody feels that this argument permits you to say that, well, I mean, the way you dress, you consented to. No, 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 no. Nope, 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 nope. That's not how that works, right? They consented to going out to have a good time and they wanted to look good. That's what they consented to. That's what they put out there, was that they wanted to have a good time. They wanted to be comfortable. They wanted to look good. That's what they did. I think there are too many predators who justify their predatory, habits, obsessions, instincts, whatever, by making these stupid claims that, well, if they weren't there, I mean, wrong place, wrong time, right? That's kind of the definition in some respects of a lack of consent. They were not, maybe they should not have been there. Fine. But that's not what they went out to do. They didn't go out to find trouble. They didn't go out to find a place to be in trouble. And for those people that did, well, I mean, that's a detrimental consequence of your choice, of your consenting to go out and perform these acts, right? So again, I think it's really important to understand, and I may have to flesh this out more, right? But that's part of what I'm doing here, right? Is this idea that there's a lot to kind of figure out, and there are ways to turn what I'm saying into something else that I definitely don't intend, and there are ways to turn it into something that I probably do intend, but I don't know how to say it. So being able to share this with people and being able to allow others to provide feedback is me consenting to the idea that, yeah, I have this idea. I think it's a good one. I don't even want that. It's not proving me wrong. It's, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you find validity in kind of what I'm presenting? And I'm going to do more of these because I have a few of these different items that I want to kind of go through and talk through. So there will be others, but I mean, between the love of money is the root of all evil. I don't necessarily have to go into that. I don't think. I'm sure that I could. Yeah, you're not. I'm not. No, I'm not that blank. And consent in all things, right? So, and a lot of that is being careful. So there's one other thing that I think about from time to time, and that's, I can't remember. I'm sorry, I can't remember specifically how this went down. I'm pretty sure it was an argument that I was having with my mother and one of her friends, which I've had a few of those to the point where they actually talked about writing to the dictionary to have words changed. I was a teenager then, so that gives you some kind of sense of the kind of dick that I was. But I was definitely correct. They were just annoyed about it. But there was something else that I explained to my mother at some point. I think it was something about the meek shall inherit the earth, because that's another thing that I kept hearing my mother. And this discussion happened when I was older. And the problem that I had, one of the problems I had with that concept, or with the idea that just because my mother or the group of believers that we were a part of were saying or doing certain things, didn't mean other people respected it at all. And my statement to her was that, not everybody plays by the same rules. And that's another reason why I'm thinking about guardrails more than rules, because there are ways to apply these concepts. And sometimes it just takes us a bit to think about it and how to process what it is that's being said and how to apply it. Because semantically, educationally, experientially, the things that we think about, the things that we believe in, are going to apply differently to different circumstances, right? So if there are a few things that can be used to help give us some insight into how maybe to think about certain things, great. I'm not looking for abject solutions. If I have an idea, then I should be able to figure out how to apply it in my own situation, based on my own experiences, my own understanding of things. And I hope that is helpful because I need that. I need some of that because I have too much anxiety around what must be, right? What do I have to do? Work, sure. Dishes, uh, what month is it? We need some flexibility. We need some rigidity, I think. But it doesn't have to dominate our existence. We shouldn't have to be constantly terrified. Oh, that was the other thing I was thinking about. All right, sorry, I started this thought process in my brain at like 1:30 this morning when I was trying to sleep and failed till about 4 this morning. But one of the arguments that I hear, especially on YouTube, but from religious people in general, largely Abrahamics, because those are the ones where I'm typically focused, is that people like myself who are non-believers, we deny God because we don't want to be held responsible for our actions. We don't want to be responsible for violating God's law. So a couple things are wrong with that. The way that I'm saying it anyway, it's not 100% how people are wording it. Those are just two of the takeaways that I've gotten from hearing it. And if you're familiar at all with the series The Way of the Master, this lunatic Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron, of all people, put out a series of videos where they claim to be able to beat atheists, at their own game. And, Ray Comfort has for a very long time shown videos of him street preaching, talking to non-believers, saying, hey, have you ever lied to somebody? Yeah. All right, well, then, by your own admission, you have committed sin. You're in a violation of God's law, blah, 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 blah. And I only had one time in one of the videos where one of the guys we were talking to was like, yeah, but I don't believe in your Bible. It was kind of the one time that he got, like, hey, guess what? I don't care. Oh, that's a fire truck. That's going to be loud. Trying to get out of their way, and you got literally in their way. I thought they blew over to one side. Terrifying. Yeah. What was that? Atheist Nightmare? Yeah, the band was the Atheist Nightmare. God, that whole video pissed me off. It's like episode 3. That video got me really mad. I was 25. Super annoying video. Super annoying. Just disingenuous nut job. Doesn't actually care to engage in a conversation with people. Just wants to spew his nonsense and then be like, haha, I got you. See? The Bible says you're a sinner. I don't care. What are you talking about? I don't care. I don't live by your rules. I don't play the game the way that you want me to play it. And look, not for nothing, the Christian faith is unable to have a consistent message. And I'm not going to say that every religion or that any religion has a consistent messaging. There's different chunks of them throughout history that say one thing or something else and they disagree with each other and sometimes they try to kill each other. These things happen and it's nonsense. And I honestly, I think that's part of why it's more part of why I'm trying to come up with these ideas of guardrails, just these suggestions and not these commandments, because when you have this rigid ideology, please go forward. I know the truck's not going very fast, but there's a lot of space between you and the truck. And I kind of need you to pay attention to that. Oh, you dropped your thing. Sorry, kids are getting out of school, and one girl was running all excited, yelling at her friend, and she dropped some stuff. But I don't think she heard me. And now, like, this road is not friendly enough for me to stop and yell at a kid, just traffic-wise, and I would be yelling at some random child. Hopefully they find it before there's weather. Yeah, okay. So this idea that we need religion to tell us what to do and what not to do, and if we don't do it the right way, we should be punished. These are concepts that I find bothersome. And I didn't become what I am because I'm rebelling. I became what I am because I observed the people that were telling me what to do. I'm just with my parents. people in the church, people at all the churches we went to. The amount of churches that we went through, I mean, moving was a big part of it, but the amount of times that we found the teachings to be less than ideal because we disagreed with them. I know a number of people who have gone to different churches and have decided that, oh, we don't agree with that. And so they left. The no true Scotsman fallacy. I mean, look, I have some friends that are believers, and I have trouble understanding how they consider themselves believers, because I grew up in evangelical Christianity of the 80s, right? The prosperity gospel in full effect. Faith healings, movements of the spirit, prophecies, speaking in tongues. I was in all of that. And to be around people who aren't as embedded in their identity as I had to be growing up, sometimes it's very confusing to me. And largely the people that you find on the internet that are the most troublesome are these, zealous evangelicals who are just obnoxious. And so that's what I grew up with. That's what I'm still kind of experiencing largely. And it's not like we talk. We don't have, they identify as having the faith, but they don't start that way. People I grew up with started that way. Right? Are you American? No, I'm a Christian first, right? God, Jesus, family, country, whatever. And the hierarchy of the family was, of course, the father, and after God and Jesus, right? It's very rigid, and it's very much, you have certain expectations, and you have to do these things in a certain way in order to be appropriately identified and to be able to consider yourself a believer, or you were a backslider, which was not as bad as an apostate, but it was pretty close. I mean, we treated backsliders. We probably treated backsliders as bad as apostates. I mean, largely we seem to be people that were, stepping away from the church. They were just backsliders. But realistically, I think from a religious scripture standpoint, a lot of us became apostates. And I'm pretty sure the prescription in the Bible is still to kill them as well. You hear about it more with Islam, because they seem to refuse to move beyond their kind of absolute rigidity in many respects, and not all Muslims, but those are things we hear about a lot. Again, those are the circles that I'm a part of, so I see a lot of that. And I think that consent in all things would really damage those ideas. And I understand that there are triad wives, and there are women of different faiths who definitely just believe or accept the situation that they're in. And it's easy enough to say that they're brainwashed, or that they're Stockholm Syndrome, or they're just so abused and afraid that they can't get out of it. Right? All of those things are true. And to some extent, there is an amount of consent. But they are largely victims. Right? And they're consenting to staying alive. They're consenting to keeping the peace. They're consenting to these actions because they don't really have a choice. And again, consent doesn't always mean that we're consenting to the good thing. Sometimes we're consenting to the least amount of personal suffering, because we know it could be worse, because it gets worse if you try to defy it. You try to defy what someone else wants. I'm not going to pretend like all of these things that I'm coming up with are going to be easy to implement, or will get you everything you want in life. What I'm after is trying to provide these ideas of things to consider, things to think about, and to help us kind of narrow down the things that we are trying to process. Where does this fit into my, my 4-lane highway of guardrails, right? Or my 4-lane highway where there are guardrails, how much maneuverability do I have? How much can I move around in a given situation to make sure that I'm suffering the least amount and that I'm not causing suffering? That's something else that we'll talk about, but um, I don't know. You know, I do go into this largely where I'm talking to myself, which I've done for a very long time. And these are the kind of conversations I would have just with myself driving around. So I appreciate anybody and everybody who comes along for the ride and who may join the ride. And if you jump off the ride, fine. Um, tuck and roll, right? Tuck and roll if you're jumping off a moving vehicle, and hopefully it's not going too fast. But I'm hopeful. And look, I've got kids. I want to develop some semblance of something that I can just provide them, because I don't want them to be me. I mean, I tell them all the time, I'm a horrible role model. Don't grow up to be me. I have a lot of problems, and I've allowed a lot of things to affect me, and I have a lot of things that have affected me, and a lot of it I can't control. I couldn't control. I couldn't stop. Can't stop. It's where the brain is right now, and I'm trying to figure out if I can, rewire my own neurons to see things in a different light. To try to come up with something that I can use to, quiet my own demons, my own sense of self-worth, and all the fears that permeate my being. And some of that is just some of the like Stoic philosophy, or just really anyone suggesting that you stop and breathe. Right, take a moment. Just take a moment. It's your initial gut reaction is always going to be correct, right? Sometimes you need to calm the reactive part, that instant reactive part, to then allow more logical to kick in. You're still going to make decisions with emotion. You can't not. I don't believe that you can be perfectly logical. I think it's helpful to be logical, but that's just to help you get beyond just being reactive and doing things based on ignorance and anger, rather than, okay, here's what's going on, here's what's happened, here's all the things that I'm aware of, here's all the things that I'm not, everything else I'm not aware of, I suppose. What do I do with what I've got? And are the consequences of my actions going to be beneficial or detrimental? And I know this got a little windy. I'm trying to stay more on topic, so I'm hoping that today was better, and I hope that I can provide some more ideas, and that, hey, if there's feedback, definitely send it to me. I mean, all of you that are listening know me personally, so just go ahead and send some feedback and let me know if you think I'm off my rocker, or if you have some other thoughts. Anyway, thanks for listening.